everybody, Pastor Andy here. Great to be back with you for Making It Simple. We are talking about being in the storm, holding on to our faith in the storm. Our story left us yesterday as Peter has been given the invitation from Jesus to come and join him on the water. Now, I think this is an interesting thing because as we look at the power of this story, the supernatural, the just everything, it's pretty amazing when we see what's going on. So today we pick back up on where we left off. Peter has been given the invitation. Peter had said, "Command me. If it's you, Lord, command me to come." But Jesus didn't do that. Jesus did not say, "Get out here," or "you will." No, he said, "Come." That was an invitation. And I think it's important to understand the difference between that. Okay? Had it been forced, it would not have been real. It had to be of Peter's own accord in order for it to mean anything. All right? So we find Peter today, he's exiting the boat. All right? And it tells us, Scripture here tells us he started. That's important to understand that. He started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. Started there is the key word, because if we think of the implication of that word, I'm starting to do something, that is oftentimes an attitude of, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to make an effort. But is that true faith? Is that true faith, or is that merely searching for a possible answer? And I'll tell you why I said that as this story unfolds, right? So is it, I'm just headed out because this, or, well, we'll see if this will work. Because oftentimes that's where we find ourselves, if we're just being honest. That is where we find ourselves because we're still not sure. We're stepping out on to the water from the safety of the boat. I know that this is okay. That's not. However, though, in the boat, it wasn't good either because it's rocking and rolling and the waves are crashing. And so that's an uncertainty as well. So we have to understand how this impacts our faith and how we trust Jesus in the storm or we don't. There's really no gray area here. So we find Peter, he's walking on the water toward Jesus. And here's the thing, understand this. The storm is still taking place. It has not seceded. The winds have not stopped. The waves have not stopped. All of this is still happening. Trusting him in the storm. That's where our faith grows, friends. It's not when it gets better. It's not when it calms down. It's when it's at its worst. That is when we find the greatest place of growth. So Peter has stepped out onto the unsettled water, the churning water. The wind is blowing, the water's splashing in his face. There's a great amount of uncertainty here. But do I trust him or not? Verse 30, Peter is headed toward Jesus. I want you to understand the picture of this, the analogy of this. He's headed toward Jesus. So in other words, the answer is in sight. The answer is in sight. The answer is within grasp. And then we find the but. But always changes everything. The pause, if you will. So he's on the way to Jesus. There's the answer. Jesus said, "Come." If we are seeing ourselves as Peter, I have asked you to call me out to be with you because that's where I want to be. I want to be where you are. And if it's you, call me out there. Well, Jesus invited him to come. Come on. Peter stepped out of the boat. He's on the water. He's walking toward Jesus. And then Scripture says, but when he saw the strength of the wind, so wait a minute, his focus now is no longer on Jesus. He saw the strength of the wind. Oh man, what have I done? Look at how powerful this is. Look at how strong this. What am I doing? It tells us he was afraid. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Because everybody would say, well, Pastor, that's the natural response, right? I mean, I'm on the water. That's not supposed to happen. And the wind is blowing and the waves are crashing. So yes, that's a fear. But Jesus said, do not be afraid. It is I. It's okay. The very thing Jesus said don't do, we find Peter doing. He was afraid, and it says, and began to sink. In other words, his focus is off Jesus now. His focus is off the answer now. So the answer is no longer clear. The answer is no longer very obvious. The place that takes over in those moments, this is the natural human response. What am I going to do? Look at the mess that I'm in. Clearly, no one can help me because it's a lost cause. So what am I going to do? Now, you would think the reason that matters in the context of this particular account is as they have just left the shore, the miraculous feeding, it began with that same dilemma. Jesus said, let's feed these, and the instant response was, what? How am I going to do that? You see how that becomes a problem? Peter said, what am I going to do? And he went down like a rock. He took his eyes off the answer. He took his eyes off the solution to everything. He took his eyes off of the faith that he had in the one who had called him out to start with, and he began to sink. And it tells us he cried out. In other words, this was a desperation. Fear has grabbed me. Fear is pulling me down. And then we find the most powerful three-word prayer in the entirety of Scripture. As it is written, Peter said, Lord, save me. Some versions say, Lord, help me. Regardless, three words, the most powerful prayer that we can find. It tells us Peter cried out, Lord, save me. Lord, help me. And then we read, immediately, Jesus reached out his hand. Friends, he's there. How could I say that with a surety? Because he told Peter, come. Peter said, I want to be with you. He said, come on. Would he have called him to danger? Would he have called him to something that was impossible? Would he have called him to doom and gloom and all those other things? No, absolutely not. He would have never done that. He called him to be with him. And that's the answer. That's still the answer. And that's what he's saying to us today. And it tells us that he reached out his hand and he called hold to Peter. He's safe now. And he said, this is Jesus speaking to Peter. You of little faith. Now, was that a chastisement? No. It was a, why did you doubt me? You know what we can do. You know what I can do. You of little faith. You had some. You had some, clearly, without a doubt. You had some, or you wouldn't have stepped out of the boat at all. But you didn't have enough to keep going. I want you to think about that, friends. I do. I want you to think about the power of that. Because sometimes we wrestle with that. I've got some faith, but do I have enough? That's not a judgment thing. That's a self-reflection thing. I've got enough, maybe I've got enough to step out of the boat, but do I have enough to keep walking? Or does fear overcome me and I go down? That's what we find out here, because Jesus is asking Peter, why did you doubt me? I've never given you any reason to do that. And that's exactly what he's telling each one of us. We must trust him in the storm, my friends. God bless you. Come back next week and finish up this great lesson. We got a couple more left. I've really enjoyed the feedback that I've gotten on this, and I hope that it's been a blessing to you. And I look forward to bringing you the remainder of In the Storm. I'll see you on Monday.